This is the Financially Simple Podcast, the show dedicated to destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner. The content in the show is for informational purposes only. This show is not investment advice. Instead, seek help from a competent financial advisor or conduct your own due diligence. Justin Goodbread, CFP, is an investment advisor representative of Heritage Investors, a registered investment advisor only conducting business in states where it is properly registered or is excluded or exempted from registration requirements. Registration is not an endorsement of the firm by securities regulators and does not mean the advisor has achieved a specific level of skill or ability. Here's your host, pizza-loving, certified financial planner, Justin Goodbread.
Welcome, friends. Welcome to the Financially Simple Podcast. Today, I want to talk to you about the psychology of money, or the fancy term in the financial world is called behavioral finance. Behavioral finance. If I'm going to teach you how to take control of your personal finances, your cash flow, your risk, your investments, and your distributions, you must know why we lose control of those things. So we're going to talk about behavior. You see, the way you think about money directly affects the way you behave with money. Let me say that again, because that is a very, very important key that I want to drive home. The way that you think about money directly affects the way you behave with money. There's a biblical principle that says, as a man thinketh in his heart or in his mind, as a man thinketh, so is he. So are his actions. The same principle works in money. See, your personal beliefs and your unique experiences create your biases about life. Everything that you've dealt with, your personal beliefs and all the experiences that you come to at this point of your life is creating your biases about money. I heard one person say, we are the sum total of our experiences and our decisions. And the same could be true about the way we view money. And those money biases affect your feelings and your expectations. Those expectations that we had will then cause us to many times listen to our feelings, or many times they'll set our expectations, and the expectations could be flawed. See, your feelings and your emotions lead us. They'll lead you, they'll lead me to act in a positive or a negative manner in how we manage money or how we handle money. So I want you to listen to this loud and clear. The way you think about money directly affects the way you behave with money. One case in point is compound interest. Compound interest. Even some of the most highly educated people that we would look at don't understand the true value of compound interest. It's amazing. I mean, Albert Einstein is attributed, whether or not he said this, I don't know, but many have attributed Albert Einstein to saying that compounding interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Those who understand it earn it. Those who don't pay it. Okay. So the way you think about money directly affects the way you behave with your money. Typically, if your emotions affect your actions, then you're going to react or act irrationally with money rather than rationally. Let me say that one more time. Typically, if your emotions affect your actions, so if you're an emotional type person, then you're going to react or act irrationally with money rather than rationally. The concept of behavioral finance helps us recognize our natural biases that lead us to making either logical or illogical decisions when it comes to our money and finances. So today I wanted to deal with many. We're going to deal with a total of 19 different money biases. And I'm sure you're going to fit into one, maybe two, maybe three of these biases. And they're things that we formulate from living life. The things that we've dealt with in life that made us formulate our ideas about money. And these biases could hurt us. These biases could hurt us. So I'm going to put these in alphabetical order. They're not in order of importance, but I want to give you 19 different biases. And as I go through these biases, I want you to think about, does this one affect me or not? And in fact, you may even say, yep, I purposefully dealt with that one and it costs me some money. So let's have a little fun with this. I think you'll like this, but more importantly, let's use it as a teaching system. So number one is affinity bias. Affinity bias. That begins with AFFINITY. For those of you who don't understand my Southern drawl, affinity bias. And that is the preference to invest in companies, organizations, or people who share our values. So we want to invest in companies, organizations, people that share our values. Oftentimes here in the Bible Belt, we'll have people that for religious purposes will not invest in certain areas. And that's called an affinity bias. So they may be ultra conservative. And they say, look, I don't want to buy anything that has to deal with tobacco or alcohol. There are people that do that, and that's fine. The opposite side, they may not be ultra conservative. There may be one that says, you know what, I don't want to invest in anything that has to deal with guns or with abortions or with pick any hot topic out there. That's a method of affinity bias. Now, I'm not saying it's bad or good, but it could lead to some negative or positive effects. The next one is anchor bias. Anchor bias. And this is the reliance on a statistically arbitrary anchoring point or numbers to make a financial decision. So, for example, you know your hometown. You know your hometown. You know where you live. Thus, you're only going to buy real estate in your hometown. That's an anchoring bias. Or, you know what? I know this particular store that offers this particular product. And I realize there's many other stores out there that offer the same product, but I'm only going to buy it from this one store because I'm very familiar with it. I know I'm anchored in the familiarity of that particular bias. So that's an anchoring bias. So it's a reliance on a statistical arbitration or anchoring point or numbers to make a financial decision. We often see anchoring bias, by the way, in our purchasing. We'll say, you know what? In fact, we had this happen with Emily and I. We were buying some feed for our animals, and we drive by 2 or 3 feed stores, but it was easy for us, and we knew that the feed was $10 a bag, let's say. Well, man, we passed another store that had it for $6 a bag, and we just never checked it. So we were anchored in our particular decision making. So that's an anchoring bias. The third one is bandwagon biased. Yes, bandwagon. We typically see bandwagoning when it comes to sports, but it works in the world of finance too. And it's the tendency to follow the crowd's financial actions, even if the crowd is following a different financial plan than you are. Man, I see this more than anything else in stocks, individual stocks. Name a company out there that you're all over the news and everybody wants to go in and buy it. Forget the fact that the worst company, you shouldn't even own it, boom, 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 but everybody wants to buy it. So with bandwagon bias, we actually saw a little bit of this back during the Bitcoin run up of last year, 2018. Bandwagoning. People jumped in and man, so many people lost their money when they were buying it at 18, 19,000 and now it's in the 3, 4,000 range. That's a bandwagon bias. One of the ones that I deal with in the office a lot, number 4, is confirmation bias. And that is, confirmation bias is the tendency to focus on information that confirms your first impression or confirms your preconceived notion or your beliefs. And you're going to ignore or devalue information that contradicts those. So confirmation bias is we only want to hear the people who we agree with. We had a client in our office not too long ago, and he said, Justin, I really want to spend this $50,000 on my house in this particular manner. And if I do so, I am confident that it is going to increase the value of my home. Don't you agree? And what he was trying to pin me down is to get me to confirm his belief. And I said, no, I don't agree. You will not return the return that you're expecting. And he tried every different angle. I said, look, you're running confirmation bias. You're trying to get me to confirm what you want to do. I'm not going to do it. Go out and do what you want to do, but it's not going to yield the same results. And he started laughing. He goes, yep, you're right. It's confirmation bias. So number 5 would be endowment bias. And it's a tendency to value items or assets more once you own them than you do when you are renting or borrowing them. So for example, I have this piece of rental real estate. I really, really, really like this piece of rental estate. What do you think, Mr. Financial Planner? I had this question to somebody who had some California property. And I said, look, if you had the same value, so that this property is worth about $1.4 million. And I said, look, if you had $1.4 million today, would you buy this exact same rental unit? And he said, absolutely not. That's an endowment bias. We often deal with this in stocks. Somebody loves a stock. They used to work for the company. They have a lot of good memories about the company. Will they buy the exact same stock today? Probably not. That's an endowment bias. Number 6 is familiarity bias. And this is the preference to invest in familiar or well-known companies rather than doing research on ones which you're not familiar with. So we can name some popular companies out there. I mean, everybody knows Apple. Let's go out and buy Apple. I'm not saying it's a good or a bad investment. Do your own due diligence on that, but that's familiarity bias. If we're familiar with the name, we're not going to try to find another competitor that maybe is in the same space that has maybe potentially to make more money. No, we're just going to buy what we're familiar with. And number 7, we have what's called framing bias. F-R-A-M-I-N-G, framing bias. And this is the tendency to make decisions based on the way the information is presented rather than on the information itself. So I call this buying into the sales pitch. Okay. The way people frame things to you, you make a decision on that versus thinking holistically and critically about the bigger informational piece. Number 8 is called hindsight bias. Yeah, hindsight's 20/20, they say. And this is the belief that you either predicted or could have predicted past events so that you were, quote, always right. Oh yeah, I knew the stock market was going to drop, or I knew that investment was going to do really good, or I knew I shouldn't have bought that particular thing. I just knew it. That's called a hindsight bias. Okay. Number 9 is the illusion of control. The illusion of control bias. The thought that you can control investment outcomes. Look, friends, there's many things I've learned that I can control. Actually, there's more things I've learned that I can't control than what I can control. You cannot control the results of an investment outcome. You can't do it. So I don't care who you are, what you think you can do. You can't. Even the most powerful people in the world cannot control investment outcomes. Though they try to manipulate it, they still can't control it.
You're listening to the Financially Simple Podcast. Show your support by subscribing to this and our other educational business channels at financiallysimple.com.
Number 10 is what's called loss aversion bias. Man, this one eats up my generation more than anything else. And it's the desire to avoid taking risk that could bring about loss or negative outcomes, even if the potential gains could be greater than the losses. It's called loss aversion bias. We see this a lot because the generation that lived through 2008 and 9, whether they were close to retirement, they had some major losses, or they were listening to their mamas and daddies talk about the major losses in 2007 through 2009. Now they just don't want to deal with it. So it's called loss aversion bias. Not a good one there. Mental accounting bias. We all do this. It's a tendency to separate and to group assets into separate mental accounts, even though money is money, regardless if we use it. We all have a tendency to do this, don't we? We look in our checking accounts or our savings accounts or our investment accounts, and we say this percentage of money is dedicated to buying that new gun or buying that new fishing rod or buying that new, my wife would say, this new chicken coop. She's been bugging me about a chicken coop. Anyways, you're counting dollars. You're keeping a mental accounting. You're trying to separate groups into things that you can use regardless of whether you should use that money or not. Number 12 is what's called outcome bias, the tendency to make financial decisions based on the outcomes instead of the processes that brought the outcomes. We always look at what we want to have happen and not pay attention to what's going to actually bring the outcome, the processes that brings us to us. Number 13, man, I deal with this in young males, men typically under the age of 50. I deal with it a little bit in those individuals who are 50 to 60, but it's called overconfidence bias. It's the unsubstantiated faith in your own judgment, reasonings, and analytical abilities when it comes to making financial decisions. It's overconfidence. I've done this. I know how to make it work. I often say in my business world, whenever I find out somebody has an MBA, a Master's in Business Administration, they're their worst enemies because they're overconfident. They have technical training that they don't know how to apply to the real world many times. If you have an MBA, I'm sorry I just offended you. That's just my personal opinion. You have an MBA, I typically charge more money because I have to do so much more work because of overconfidence bias. Maybe you hit a home run on a good investment. Maybe it was a piece of real estate. Now all of a sudden you become a real estate tycoon. Overconfidence bias. One that we dealt with often here recently is what's called recency bias. This is number 14, recency bias. And it's the tendency to make financial decisions based on recent events rather than events that happened in a more distant past. So think about last October through January. If you have any type of investment account at all, the stock market, it went bad. It was not good. Depending on which index you're looking at, you could have lost between 12 to 20, 25, 30%, depending on which equity index you were looking at. I literally had people say, man, the stock market is going to go to zero. That's called recency bias. I heard someone say years ago that it's like standing at the window, and I even used this example in one of my videos. It's like standing at the window and me watching an inch of snowfall in Knox County, Tennessee, which probably doesn't happen much, in about an hour. And all of a sudden I tell Emily, I'm like, Emily, grab the kids, grab the goats, grab the dogs, grab the chicken, grab everything, because if this thing continues, man, we are going to have 30 foot of snow come February. Well, that's ludicrous. That's what recency bias sounds like when you actually think about it. Number 15 is representative bias. Representative bias. And it's a tendency to classify financial events, decisions, and outcomes based on past experiences. Wow. 2007, 2009, man, the stock market went crazy. And so many of the millennials and even the Generation X, the younger of us, man, I deal with so many people that they're sitting in cash. They're saving monies in cash because 07, 08 was awful. And I remember that. And I saw the events and I saw the outcomes of 07 for 08. And yet these individuals missed an unbelievable rally, some 200, 300%, depending on the index on the bull market. Unbelievable. And that's what's called representative bias. Number 16 is self-attribution bias. Self-attribution bias. And this is a tendency to attribute successful financial outcomes to your own talents, skills, and actions, and to attribute unfavorable financial outcomes to external factors. We all like to do this. I'm telling you, there's probably not a person alive that doesn't do self-attribution bias. We hear it. We'll hear people say, man, I bought this stellar stock over here. Let me tell you about the stock I bought. Or, man, ever since I made these adjustments in my business, I did these things. And then when it falls and whenever we don't do it, well, that broker hurt me. My financial advisor didn't know what they were talking about. That consultant in my business didn't know what they were talking about. My real estate agent, they had no clue. I should have never bought this. So we like to take the credit when it's good, but when it's bad, we like to blame somebody else. That's called self-attribution bias. And there's not a person that doesn't do that. If it's a business owner, you forget that the macroeconomics were a factor in your business acceleration or deceleration. So it's called self-attribution bias. Number 17, self-control bias. It's the tendency to act in opposition of your best interest because you lack self-control. Number 17 is why I do not manage my own money. And this is the reason why 99.9999999% of the world should not do their own finances. Because money is emotional to us. We bust our tails for it. And we have a tendency to sell low or to try to fix something. It's called self-control bias. I even wrote an article years ago. It's on the blog post talking about the Caltron girls. We'll put a link in this particular episode on the Financially Simple blog. But I wrote an article about the Caltron girls and how these high school girls actually outperform the PhDs when building the atomic weapon here in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And it's because the PhDs had self-control bias. Interesting little study. You ought to read it. Number 18 is status quo bias. We would say it, the preface of keeping your finances status quo in order to avoid change of any kind. We want to be middle of the road. We don't want to get too aggressive, too conservative. It's just status quo. Even though we have an opportunity or we could avoid something. Everybody else went down in value. We should do the same thing. Everybody else bought a new car. That's also leads us into number 19. The final one is called trend chasing bias. The tendency to make financial investments based upon past performance, thinking that past performance indicates future performance. Look, we have to say it as a disclosure for our financial world. Past performance is not indicative of future results. And any advice contrary, any statement to the contrary of that is a federal offense. So why is it that we look at investments that, well, they've been doing the good the last 5 years. Let's go out and buy one. Real estate, my goodness. If I could get on a soapbox here, and I don't have time to do it today, I would get on the real estate investing soapbox because I hear so many people say, I want to go out and buy a piece of rental property. They have no clue what they're doing, all because Hollywood got a hold of a financial product, a piece of real estate, and now they talk about flip this house, rent this house out, make gazillions of dollars. And now everybody wants to run out and do it. Yep, I've got some of the most savvy real estate investors been doing it for 30, 40, 50 years that are acting exactly opposite of the way this new, young, full of venom, just full of spunk people are doing. So they're trend chasing. Man, That one hurts more people than anything else is trend chasing. By identifying your bias, I've gone through 19 of them there. I don't know about you, but I had like 7 of them, which are my biases. Everybody does. And there's no one that's perfect when it comes to money. By identifying the biases you have about money, then you can build financial guardrails, financial strategies, financial safe harbors in your life to neutralize your emotions during stressful periods. In order to control your cash flow, your risk management, your investments, and your distributions, you must act rationally. You can't allow emotions to drive you. But here's where it gets difficult, is you have to act rationally over a very, 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 very long period of time. Building wealth is not a sprint. Yeah, we've heard the get-rich-quick schemes. We heard it, but it's not a get-rich-quick scheme. Building wealth. In fact, there's an old Chinese proverb that says, if you get it fast, you lose it fast. I just summarize it in redneck terms, but that's what it says. Money comes easy, money goes easy. We don't want that. We want to build long, sustainable net worth. And in order to do that, we have to run a marathon. In order to run the marathon, you cannot succumb to your own biases when it comes to money. So I want to lay those out as a base level piece of information to help us through this series that now we're getting ready to dive headlong into, and that is cash flow. In the episodes coming up, we're going to talk about how you make money and where you spend it. And believe it or not, there's about 30 different episodes in that one area. I think you're going to be intrigued about all the different ways you can make money and spend money smartly. Until then, guys, check out the Financial Simple blog. There's going to be several different show notes. We're going to link some other blogs on this particular episode to help you understand where we're headed. If you like the podcast, do me a favor, leave a review. If you like the podcast, share it with a friend. Season 2 is on its way now. I'm excited about it. I am pumped up. This is right in my element. I love this stuff. Believe it or not, I don't even have to study much for these type of episodes. This is just me putting some quick notes on paper and let's roll with it. Because this is just, man, this is like meat and potatoes here, guys. Until next time, look, life is hard. It is. Life is good. Life can be frustrating. Money doesn't have to be. It really doesn't. Let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Y'all go out and make this an outstanding day.
You've been listening to the Financially Simple podcast. For more business and personal financial help and information, head over to financiallysimple.com today.